My greatest fear was jumping out of a plane. For years, I would have nightmares and dreams about how terrified I was. And I was like ashamed of myself because I see myself as a fearless warrior. But the truth was I'm just as scared as everybody else. And so, for me, I had to take on that challenge, and I went out there and I got my solo skydiving license. And I remember multiple times, especially that first day where I had to jump out on my own and there was no trainer. I had to jump out of the back of the plane looking down at the ground, and I'm thinking, what the frick are you doing here? And you don't need this. You don't need this problem. Go back to bed. And I looked at him, and he knew I was about to bail. And he's like, don't you fucking do it. Don't you bail. I'm out. Like I jumped out of the plane head first, flopping and turning, and eventually stabilized myself. But it was the most beautiful, proud, incredible moment of my life where I popped that chute. I did it all on my own. I faced my greatest fear ever. And I had to do that because I had to prove to myself I could do anything.
Welcome to the Founders Journey Podcast. I'm Greg Moran.
I'm Peter Dean. We're founders who struggle the same way every other founder does.
Our goal is to let founders tell their own stories.
Part inspiration, part knowledge and learnings from everyday founders to make your journey a bit easier.
Hey, welcome back to the Founders Journey Podcast. Greg Moran, the host, with Peter Dean. Peter,
I made it back. I'm here.
Made it back.
I'm really excited about Andy, our next guest, because his topic's super important. I think it's something that's like, it's hidden if you're not a founder, but if you're a founder, you know this adversity comes. So super important. Really excited to hear what he has to say.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, this is, let me just go into the intro and then we'll get into what we're going to talk about. So our guest this week, really glad to have Andy Anderson. Andy's a serial entrepreneur, so certainly, a background that I think every listener will know and love and certainly identify with. He's been building companies for about 18 years. He's an author. He's a podcast host. He's a TV host, which I look forward to hearing more about. An athlete, coach, and right now he's the founder of his current company, Relentless Education. So Andy's going to tell us about that. He's fought through, just like every founder, an awful lot of adversity, plenty of times in his founder's journey, and that's really what we're going to be diving into today is the whole concept of overcoming adversity and fear. So Andy, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. Really excited to be here. And look, I love the topics that you both cover. It's so important. I know a lot of entrepreneurs need that at those early stages. So it's an honor to be here. Hopefully I can share some value. Yeah. Well, we're glad to have it. So let's just kind of start out at the top. Give us a background. Let us, let our listeners kind of get to know you a little bit better here. Where did you start? I know it's been a really interesting journey, for you along the way. I'd love to kind of start there. For sure. So I guess my founder's journey started when I was about 24, 25. So I was a fitness coach. Just a further background, I left school early, about 14 years old. Didn't know what I wanted to do. Went into a trade just because I was a bit naughty at school. Wanted to be a rock star. Didn't think that was going to work for me. So I just thought I'm going to make some money, help my mum out, work with my hands, work outdoors. And that was good, but definitely wasn't nourishing my soul. And I knew I was destined for more. I knew there was just something more out there for me. And I really loved working on my health. I lost a lot of weight at a certain stage of my life, and it blew my mind at all the things I was learning about right nutrition and the right foods. And so I took that passion and I decided to leave the carpentry game and go into being a PT, a health coach. So went and did my courses, went and became one of the top PTs at a certain large club in Melbourne. And then I was sort of stuck in the bubble of their business at that stage. They feed you the leads. I learned sales, I learned marketing there, which was fantastic, like a low-level marketing. But again, I was just yearning for a challenge and really wanted to do something on my own. I had this dream to create a gym that encompassed mindset, nutrition, training. So, that sounds really common these days, but about 12 years ago or a little bit longer, it really was not, it wasn't that common. Mindset wasn't being utilized in gyms that much. And I was obsessed with Tony Robbins and obsessed with personal development. I thought there's this missing link between, getting people results in the gym and their mindset. people aren't really working on the internal game. So I went on a bit of a journey to figure out how I was going to build a business. I had no money, no experience. I was hungry though. I had a vision. I was ready to go. And I think I jumped on this random webinar. Something happened, but I'm pretty sure it was a webinar, and they started talking about raising capital with other people's money. And I thought, wow, that is a freaking great idea. I can open a business with someone else's money, not my own. I thought that is genius. So I got obsessed with that topic. I was like, I need to learn this. I need to figure out a way to get money together. And I know if they give me the money, I'll pull this off. So I went on a journey of learning about capital raising and how to put money together, and started figuring out, profit and losses and business plans and all of those little things that you need to I guess, inspire belief that you can do something in business. When in fact, I had no freaking clue, but we charge on. I mean, that's the entrepreneurial journey. Exactly.
I'm still trying to figure it out.
No, exactly right. And so, look, long story short, over a period of time, some clients started saying, I'll put in 5K, I'll put in 10K. Some friends and family said this and that. And I thought, oh, wow, this is going to be, I could start to see how real it could actually be. And look, we end up raising me and my ex-wife, we raised about $20,000. We had enough to get a lease on this massive old building in the heart of Melbourne CBD, right near the casino. My naive mind was thinking, okay, it's old, it's run down, it's empty, pretty shitty to be honest, but there's so many people. It's in the middle of the city. I know the medium income is massive around here. Lots of corporates. I'm like, if anyone can pull this off, I can do it. I'm going to get the lease. So we put 20K down, and then I also negotiated 1 year rent free, which was massive. And unfortunately, we had no more money after that. But we had the dream, we had the building, and we started walking people through. And look, we eventually found 2 investors that were willing to put in the money. I raised just over $500,000, which was definitely needed because this building was like 2,500 square meters. So it was quite large for a gym. And because I was a chippy, I could build it myself. I built all the toilets and really renovated this whole place. But by the end of the renovation, we were left with no money again. So again, just shows you how switched on I was as an entrepreneur and a founder. But, spent all the money on the fit out. Looked great. We had no clients. We had no money. So I had to learn how to get clients. And basically my next strategy was hit the streets. So, there's a lot of people. I got a clipboard. I used to dress up in this, it's called a morph suit. I don't know if you know what they are, but they're like those one piece. You can't see the face. They're actually really scary. I don't know if it was a smart marketing tactic or not, but it's weird. It's different. I'm going to run around like this giant freak and run up to people and get their details. And so, look, I spent 6 months running around the streets of Melbourne, scaring people, getting their details, going back, calling them, getting them in, signing them up as members. And our first 100 memberships, we signed up off the street. And that was sort of how we launched the first business. And there's so much to say about that business, but eventually we grew that company from 1 location to 18 locations all over Australia. We had really cool offshoot businesses from that. We had food prep company, a little supplement company, mindset company, a whole bunch of cool things came from that business, which was fantastic. And through that, I launched my first book. I published a book, got a book deal over with a business in New York, which is fantastic, a publisher over there. And that was really the start. And so, that grinding and overcoming all those barriers from that point of view when I was, 25, turning 26, started learning about it when I was about 24. That journey was, scary as hell. It was a huge, huge leap in education that I had to get my head around, but it really set me up for, everything I do here. And like, there's so many stories in between all of that to this point now, but I mean, that gives you a bit of an idea of where I've come from and how I started the first company.
So you ran out of money 3 times, basically, you said? You kind of ran out of money.
Look, I've run out of money many times in my whole business career, but that was just in the first 12 months.
I'm just laughing because I know Greg has at least done it 3 times.
100%. Hey, look, it's the way, especially when you're trying to, you got to invest that money, and unfortunately, it doesn't grow on trees. So,
yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah.
So, what? So when you think about kind of where you started, right? And I love the story about starting, really basically starting when you were 14 years old, right? And I think, one of the things that Peter and I love to do on this podcast is talk to founders who, have taken a very non-traditional path and just sort of found a way, right? And, to kind of to navigate all of that. And, effectively, I mean, here you are 14 years old, you leave, you start this, it's kind of, that puts you on the path to be a carpenter. That puts you on the path to work for a gym. That puts you on the path to open your own gym, right? It's very much this non-traditional way, but it requires a mindset, right? It requires kind of a way of thinking. I mean, talk about that a little bit, Andy. Like what is that kind of string that thread that sort of went through there where it enables you to just keep making one step after another and sequentially larger steps to where you are today.
Yeah, well, I mean, now I guess it's a little bit easier to language what those components are. But, when you're 14, you have no idea. You've just got a feeling, don't you? It's like when I was that age, I had this feeling like I wanted adventure. I had a feeling like I could do anything if I really tried. I had a feeling like anything was possible and that if I put the energy into something, it would always grow fruit. And so that was just this sort of, unconscious belief that I'd had. My parents did not have money growing up. We didn't come from any privileged background. No entrepreneurs in my family. I mean, my dad tried to start businesses, but was never really successful at it, couldn't pull it off. So, I think it was, I often say potentially it was from my mom and dad just constantly telling me growing up that I could do anything, like they didn't have a lot of money, but they did enforce some good affirmations constantly around leadership and, being able to live a dream if I wanted to step up to that. And so I believe that maybe that was the initial thing that filled me with a certain level of belief and optimism. But then as you move forward and you get knocked down a few times, so that's the real test, isn't it? I think we all start out with this purity of endless possibility, but after a few knocks, some of us get deflated and sort of want to hide a little bit, and others chew it up, spit it out, and get back up and push on a little bit more, and it makes you a little bit stronger each and every barrier that you face. And I think I was lucky enough to just have this belief in me that even though I'd get knocked down constantly, it was just making me better. It was just making me smarter and tougher. So I think I was naturally able to frame it in a way that would serve me rather than hinder me. And now as I look back on all the skill sets, with the education that I've dedicated myself to and people that I've learned off, and always watching great people's patterns and belief systems and mindsets, you then start to learn better ways of fortifying your strength and confidence and self-belief to make sure that the massive knocks don't completely obliterate you. So, a great example of that is through COVID. I mean, I those 18 gyms, I lost majority of them through COVID. Our state was locked down for 3 years. Like, it was the harshest lockdowns in the world were in Victoria where my businesses were. So, we went through a lot of crazy stuff there. And that could have been the end of my entrepreneurial journey if I had not fortified so many different components of my mindset and energy. And again, I'm not saying it was easy. There were moments where I was freaking down and in the dumps and like hating myself, hating life and everything in between. But, even through that, I was still able to launch a bunch of new companies and launch a TV show and do all these other things purely because of the years of that conditioning, I believe, to always believe that I could pull something off and always believe there's something better.
Peter, good.
Yeah, you say, there's a quote from Instagram, I think it was, 90% of the people choose to hide. It's safer and less noisy. 10% choose to thrive. Why don't you talk about that? Because you already started talking about that, and it's based on this fear, right? Fear is that thing that divides those two groups.
For sure. Well, I really think it is. I think we're conditioned to not stick our heads out. In Australia, we call it tall poppy syndrome. You guys have less of that over there, I've noticed, but here, you step up and do big things, or, put yourself out there. It's easy to get cut down. It's easy to get your ego busted and torn. And so people have a fear of judgment, a fear of rejection, a fear of failure over here. And I mean, everywhere. It's a human trait. And I think that some of us are, lucky enough, or whatever, I don't know the right term. It's either self-developed or it's given, but either way, we choose to face the fear. We choose to learn to understand the fear, and then we choose to create strategies to keep becoming stronger. So as those, I guess, the greater heights that you face and the bigger fears that you potentially face, you're able to think through the problem and the challenges and overcome it and succeed. And I think that's the difference that makes a difference, isn't it? And, in my book, I write something about progressive overload, and I have this mindset around anything to do with fear, rather than throwing myself at it completely immediately and completely overwhelming myself. I just progressively overload myself on any fear to make sure that I'm conditioning and building that self-belief and strength. And so, I do that in business in lots of different ways to test myself, and I play this game with myself to really make myself stronger. And then, I do a bunch of other things outside of business to also challenge and test myself, like skydiving, like getting on stage with bodybuilding. These things, my greatest fear was heights. My greatest fear was jumping out of a plane. For years, I would have nightmares and dreams about how terrified I was. And I was like ashamed of myself, because I see myself as a fearless warrior. But the truth was I'm just as scared as everybody else. And so, for me, I had to take on that challenge, and I went out there and I got my solo skydiving license. And I remember multiple times, especially that first day where I had to jump out on my own and there was no trainer. I had to jump out of the back of the plane looking down at the ground, and I'm thinking, what the frick are you doing here? And you don't need this. You don't need this problem. Go back to bed. And I looked at him, and he knew I was about to bail. And he's like, don't you fucking do it. Don't you bail. I'm out. Like I jumped out of the plane head first, flopping and turning, and eventually stabilized myself. But it was the most beautiful, proud, incredible moment of my life, where I popped that chute. I did it all on my own. I faced my greatest fear ever. And I had to do that because I had to prove to myself I could do anything, because that immediately translates into my business. My business is the most important thing in my life. It's my creativity, it's my love, it's my passion. And so if there's any external thing that brings doubt into my capabilities, then it's going to hinder my growth there. And so that's why I do certain things like that, to just make sure that I'm strengthening, conditioning, fortifying the mind and the heart, so I can continue to perform at a high level.
I love there's in that last minute and a half you just talked, there's probably 5 questions that I'd love to get into. But the concept that concept of progressive overload, right, is something really interesting. It's something I've actually been thinking, sort of reading a lot about, not in the way that you're expressing it, right? But fear as something to actually not, we're sort of trained to avoid fear, right? We're sort of trained at the youngest age, right? To like, if you're afraid of something, that means you go the other direction. There's obviously a lot of reasons for that, right? I mean, that are perfectly legitimate. But fear can get so exacerbated, right? And I love that concept of progressive overload. I mean, talk about that a little bit more. Like, if you're a founder, if you're a startup, you are living in this state of fear on this level, right? This sort of moderate, intense level with these spikes of real intensity, and maybe you go slightly down below the baseline, but not far, right? How do you coach a founder or coach one of your athletes through it to say,
the baseline goes up,
right? Yeah. Here's how you
keeps coming up.
Train your mind to handle.
Yeah, well, look, I like to break it down into specifics. So it's it's easy to say progressive overload, and you start your day at your desk and you're thinking, what do I do here? But you break it down into category of departments, and the most important things. I think normally founders going into a business where they don't have a lot of experience, they don't know what they don't know, but they also don't realize they're avoiding all the hard shit. They're avoiding like prospecting, selling, going out there, finding business. If they don't have money, that's not an excuse not to get business. They could be door knocking. They could be going door to door around every business. They could be getting yellow pages out. Like, there's so many. If you really had that mindset of I'll do whatever it takes to make this work, you would find a way, right? There's so many ways without putting ad spend into Facebook and other areas like that. And so with my approach to business, I look at what resources, if it's myself, what resources do I have? If I'm coaching someone, I'm like, what resources do you have? Do you have money to put in the marketing and sales? No. Okay. Well, you've either got sweat equity or you've got money. And if you don't have money, you got to put in sweat equity. So this is the play that you're going to have to do if you're serious about this game. And so, with that said, it might be sales, because most people have this fear around sales and rejection. And I'll say, look, I'm not going to get you to 100 sales calls today, but I'm going to get you to have 3 conversations, just 3. It's that easy. And all you're going to do is you're going to DM these 3 people, or you're going to call these 3 people, or you're going to get your phone out and call 3 friends and beg them to buy something off you, whatever it is, But the next day you do 5, and the next day you do 20, until you then set up a bit of a consistent benchmark around the thing that you ate or the thing that you're uncomfortable around. And by the time you've done, a few weeks of this, it becomes nothing, because you adapt to the process. And obviously you become good at it as well. And so, I've trained a lot of different sales teams. I've trained call center teams. I've had a whole bunch of different sales teams. And I've always seen the same patterns in people coming into sales. And so I always get them started with that in the onboarding, slowly. If they've got talent, I can push them a bit harder, but it's always the way. Same with marketing and prospecting, the same fears come up: rejection, judgment, failure, all of those things. And so progressively overload yourself with that. It might be, I'm scared to do Facebook videos. All right, sweet. Do 1 for the week. Next week, we're going to do 2. Week after, we're going to do 3. Then we're going to do 5 per week consistently. And by the end of the month, you're a pro. You're just used to doing it. And that's just the way we're built as humans. It's just like the gym, the gym sucks at the start. And, when if I'm doing jiu-jitsu or boxing or any other, form of fitness or combat sports that I'm not used to, it sucks. You're getting punched in the face a lot, but you adapt to it. You adapt to everything. And that's the beauty of being human. We're these incredible species that we literally can adapt to basically anything that we throw ourselves at. And if we do it smart, we can sort of trick the brain. We hack the brain's process. If we don't, then we freak out, and then we get overwhelmed and we quit and we run away and hide. So, the smartest thing we can do as founders is be aware of what you potentially suck at and what you're avoiding. What do you truly feel uncomfortable around, and what are you avoiding? And the truth is, that's probably the thing you need to focus on the most. Start taking bite-sized chunks out of it, and then eventually you'll have the whole cake.
Yep. Love it. There's one other thing you said in there too. I think that is interesting, right? You sort of mentioned it as a joke in passing, but you're standing up there on the plane, right? You're about to do it and you're freaking out.
Yeah.
Right. And saying, yeah, screw this, I'm not doing it. Your coach and your instructor, your coach is standing there saying, don't you fucking back out. You are not doing it, right?
Yeah.
There is that part of the startup world too. You're talking about skydiving context, but there is that part of the startup world where you actually do have to have that person whose hands are on your back.
Yeah.
Right. And
so true. Yeah. No, I think it's so important. I mean, you can get that in the form of podcasts. You can get that in the form of mentors. You can get that in the form of, entrepreneurial groups. But the founder space and the entrepreneurial space in general is a freaking lonely space. You don't know until you're in it, because you can't, once you're in business, most people can't relate to the experience that you're going through. You can't be friends with all of your team, because you've got to have this level of authority and leadership. You can't have like vulnerable conversations with people in your business, because you have to be the pillar of strength. You need to rely on mentors, and I personally, I love biographies and reading into, great people that helped me a lot think the way they thought. So you need to be smart with standing on the shoulders of giants and accessing support and inspiration in any way that you can. And again, I think we're super blessed that we've got so many resources available to us these days. Back 50, 60, 70, 80 years ago, people didn't have seminars, podcasts, webinars, all of these cool things, audio books, none of these things. So I'm really fortunate and grateful. And I think, if people could be incredible trailblazers 60 years ago, we've got no freaking excuse. If you've got a bit of hunger, everything's there for you to take.
I think you made a really good point. You said something about like being afraid of sales, but some people aren't afraid of sales and they're running at that, but they're afraid to get some help. And that you made a point that's really strong. That may be what you're afraid of, and that's your fear. And you don't want to go get help. You want to do everything yourself and do all that. It's kind of my road a little bit, but getting help and letting people help you and letting them in and listen to you and then tell them how I don't know what to do here. I'm kind of screwed up. I know how to do this, but I don't know how to solve for this problem.
Yeah.
That's sometimes the hard thing for someone.
I agree.
I know a lot of people are scared of sales, but some people aren't. And they're like, they'll run around, do that all day long, but they're not fixing other stuff because they didn't address it or deal with it.
So true, for sure. And I think, one of the 7 deadly sins is pride, right? And so
Yeah.
I think that ego and pride play such a negative role in entrepreneurship and as a business owner. And I don't think for me personally, I didn't realize that until it was too late multiple times. And so I had to learn that the hard way in regards to unresourceful ego, how I was making decisions around ego where I could have made better financial decisions, but I was doing it because I wanted to look better or I wanted to sound better or, I wanted to be perceived that I was bigger and better. Everything was about bigger and better. And so I think not until you have some, major fuck ups around that. Sorry about the swearing, but
No,
not until you have.
Sorry, we do it all the time.
Oh, perfect, great. I should have asked earlier. So not until you have some of those major fuck ups do you realize how detrimental, pride and ego is to business. And so with what you've just explained, your ego gets in the way where you don't ask for help, or you might be good at sales, but your deficiencies in finance and accounting, but you're too proud to ask for help there, and then all of a sudden your books are cooked, and you owe the tax department $300,000 or $1 million, and you're screwed. So these things matter, and I think a bit of hot wisdom for any new founder out there is be humble enough to just pay attention to yourself and what your unresourceful ego is trying to make you do. Like, I'll give you a quick story about when I first opened gyms. I was obsessed with having my logo on all of the equipment and all of these things because I wanted to just look like I had everything under lock. I was a badass. I had my own equipment, all this sort of stuff.
Yeah.
But that cost me hundreds of thousands more than I should have spent on equipment. And because of that, it was really, really painful for me and my ex-wife at the time to get the business off the ground in the first year because we ran out of money. We're struggling. I'm running around on the street like a weirdo trying to sign people up. We couldn't, many times we couldn't pay bills and stuff because we were struggling. And a lot of it was because of my decision-making early on around things I didn't need, but my ego was forcing me in that direction. So, and I had to learn that lesson many times after that one, but now it's one of the first things I check in with. I'm like, do I really need this? Why do I want this? Is it my ego or is it factual? Is this reality or is it something that I'm just trying to impress someone? I just analyze my thoughts and my decisions way more now because I know at the end of the day, it could cost me a lot. It could be huge financial mistakes. It also, can create a whole lot of different unresourceful and terrible situations in other areas of your life. So as a founder, as an entrepreneur, check your ego, check your pride, and make decisions resourcefully.
So much of the entrepreneurial mindset, right? It goes even beyond mindset. It's pure identity, right? This is what I am. And in a lot of ways, this is where, I think that the parallel to professional athletics or things like that really come in. Like, this is what I am, right? I am an entrepreneur. I am a founder. You'll have people that will come in and they'll start a business and decide, this isn't for me. I'm going to go back to the corporate world. Perfect. Awesome. Right?
Yeah.
But those of us that kind of stay in this world and don't get out of it, that's where that role of ego, I think, really becomes a major challenge, right? Because when it becomes your identity, you have to maintain that identity at all costs.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think what Greg's saying is so true. And it's funny because this theme of what you just said, what we've been through personally, what we hear stories about on this podcast of these people they're going through this process and they're learning and they're making these big mistakes by letting those things get in the way. And then they learn and then they get to this comfort level where they know that's a flaw, but it's also what's allowed them to get here in a way, right? So you can't discount it 100%, but you got to check in with it and know it's there. And that's the biggest, when you look at early founders, that's your biggest flaw you see probably. Greg, you see a lot more come through pitching and you can see it coming and it's exciting to you. You're like, oh man, these guys are so excited about this. But you also have to be really careful, really careful.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it can make or break businesses and fortunes. There's no doubt about it.
So let me take this kind of full circle, right? As we kind of start to wrap up here, Andy. You start when you're 14. You have a pretty, by a lot of sort of definitions, you have a pretty non-conventional start to becoming an entrepreneur, and you do it at a really young age. I mean, you said you've been at it for 18 years. You're obviously a pretty young guy. I won't ask your age, but you're still a pretty young guy. And how much of that, having to kind of start at such a young age of being, really building this, how much of that really defined you? And how much of that do you think really contributed to that sort of success that you've seen?
Yeah, look, I mean, I think it's everything. I think it all just layers on top of each other. I think every win that you get and everything that you start and even everything that fails, you are taking elements of confidence, elements of wisdom. You're taking the learnings. If you're smart, you're hopefully taking the problems and the failures and seeing how to never do that shit again, which is the most important part of business. And, again, I think that is the actual game. There is zero entrepreneurs, like great entrepreneurs out there, that haven't failed just as much as they have succeeded. It's that simple. And you don't realize that until you've, matured in business over time, because then you get to hear the war stories. But it's funny, a lot of the entrepreneurs won't share their war stories until they know that you've had a war story. So once you've had
Right.
a few hard hits, then all of a sudden, you get this badge of honor where some of these other great entrepreneurs come over and they start like sharing their story and trying to help you, and then you sort of learn from them. And that's beautiful. Like that is incredible. When I went through the chaos of COVID, I had so many great older, more mature entrepreneurs approach me, share their stories of like, how they've had to liquidate companies, and they had, bankruptcies and things that were all worse than what I was going through. And it was such a gift to just hear that and get strength from that and just be like, well, this is the game, and I'm in this freaking game, so I'm getting back in the arena and let's go, and that really sort of helps me grow and develop. So, to answer your question, I think everything feeds into the next stage if you truly want it bad enough. And if you're smart enough to let that layer the strength, the resilience, the wisdom, the strategic strength, the tactical strength. And then, of course, if you're willing to maintain the energy around business, because it's all about energy, isn't it? It's all about being able to cultivate that drive and energy to continue to face those things every single day. You can only get better and better. And, I feel like I haven't even scratched the tip. I'm so ready and so ready for the future. I think everything I've done up until this point has just been a bit of a university for me. I didn't get to go to university, didn't finish high school. This was it for me. So I'm learning my lessons, I'm applying them, and it might be the school of hard knocks, but it's the school I chose. So here we are.
It was Mark Twain's. I think it was Mark Twain's quote. I actually just saw this last night, and I'm going to butcher it. I think. What is it? Don't let school get in the way of your education. Was that the?
Love that.
I think it was
so true.
Something.
So true.
Yeah. Well, Andy, tell us what you're up to now? I mean, you got book. What it Ultimate You, right? Is the name of the book?
Yeah, absolutely. So if anyone out there wants to read up on the book, Audible, Amazon, any good bookstore through the US, etc. It's called The Ultimate You. That's a book a little bit about my journey, a little bit about my journey pre-COVID. So you'll see sort of where I was at before COVID and the vision around that. It's changed a lot, so it's actually going to be quite interesting comparing my new books and to my old books. But that book's
time for a
great.
sequel.
Yeah, exactly right. I'm due. So that's about mindset frameworks, about stories of how I, faced certain things and strategies that I used to overcome them. And then I've got a company called Change Labs, which is a new health and fitness brand. We've got a new app coming out, season 2 of our TV show here in Australia in pre-production. We're really excited about that. That company.
What's the name of the TV show?
So season 1 was called Change Labs. After the show, I don't want to give too much away just yet because we're just in the midst of selling season 2. But the name might change. But initially, if you check out Channel 7 here in Australia. It's called Change Labs.
Got it. And is that distributed outside of Australia too? If somebody's listening to this in the US or somewhere else, can they get it on?
Nate, that is a good question. I'm not quite sure if you can access it from overseas. But if
we'll try and find it. And if we can, we'll put a link.
Yeah, we'll check it down.
If you look up 7 Plus, that's the streaming channel that it's on now after it's been aired on TV. So, that was a wild journey. I produced that TV show, wrote the show, raised all the capital for it. We launched that during or just after COVID. So that was a big achievement because I was probably the worst time of my life, but still I was determined to get this off the ground and move it forward. So that was incredible. And Change Labs is a passion business for me. It's all about peak performance, mindset, recovery, and really just helping people physically, mentally, and emotionally be the best versions of themselves. So I love that company, and we're doing some really cool things there. And then, my other passion business is Relentless Education. So we teach entrepreneurs and coaches how to take their business from zero to their first $100,000, and then beyond that, from 100 to multi-million-dollar businesses in the different levels of our programs. And so that is really something that I just freaking love to do. I love having these conversations. It's exactly what we're doing today. It's talking to them about their struggles and the pains and figuring out solutions and helping share all those effed up things that I've gone through, and hopefully they don't have to go through them as well. So it's a really, really incredible business to be a part of and a founder of.
So I'll just tell you, there's a lot of people out there doing stuff like that didn't do it. Andy's someone that's done it. That's a big difference when you talk to someone that's been through the shit, so to speak.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
Pretty awesome.
Yeah, thank you.
Absolutely. Well, Andy, this was super fun to have you on. This was actually the first time we met, but hopefully not the last. And
absolutely,
and love to kind of continue to follow the story and have it back on again and talk more about what you're up to. I think this topic of overcoming adversity, of fear, of limiting beliefs. It's not one that we can talk about. We'll never be able to talk about it too much.
That's right.
In the entrepreneurial world. So really appreciate you having you join us.
Thank you so much for having me. And again, hopefully we can do it again. And love the work that you're both up to. This is important work, and hopefully everybody listening gets inspired and overcomes those fears and boundaries.
Got it. And hey, Andy, one last question. If somebody wants to connect with you and reach out to you, where's the best place to do it?
Yeah, so you can find, best place would be Instagram, first and foremost, Andy_I_Anderson. You can check out relentlesseducation.com.au. We've got YouTube, Spotify. We've got a podcast as well and other things there. So they're the best places to find me.
Got it. We'll put links in the show notes
awesome.
To get in touch with Andy. So Andy Anderson, appreciate you joining us today. Great to have you on the podcast.
Thanks so much for having me. Appreciate you.
All right, just wrapped up the podcast with Andy Anderson. Peter, what were your big takeaways?
His energy was like infectious. That was the coolest thing. But he's on, it proves you don't have to go to school, right? Because he went through all that process. He kept learning. And then that self-awareness that came is his biggest power that he has, I think. It's amazing.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Yeah, no, I mean, I love he talked about, here's a guy who's like building this thing. And, the whole COVID connection, right? I mean, we didn't get into it a whole lot, but suddenly, as this franchise of gyms and things like that, and it's like gone, right? I had forgotten. I mean, he lives in Melbourne. I had forgotten. Melbourne was like, lockdown.
Legit lockdown.
I think there might be still stuff locked down, right? And and they were, and here it is. It gets decimated. But the thing that's really interesting about when you talk to him is, and he's talked about this a couple of times, is that layering effect, right? Because we talk about this, we talk about the founder's journey as being just that, right? It's not a single event. It's not even normally a single business, right? But what he was able to do was kind of take one thing and leverage that to build the next, and leverage that to build the next, and then gets wiped out in COVID, then leverages even that to go build the next, right? And and what the journey is really all about.
It's a really big tolerance for adversity that he built up over time, right? Because then by the time he hit COVID, he'd already, run out of money a bunch of times. And, when we hear the story, there's a lot of stuff you don't hear, which he did admit that,
Right.
There's a lot of stuff that's like, it's up and down. It is down. It feels down, even if you have this mindset, but you have to keep bouncing back up. But that was really cool. And he talked about that, but I like this idea of like his adversity level, he can handle here. He kind of got to here. And then he's like, okay, this is a new one for me. Like COVID, I'm going to go find out what to do, and figured it out again,
Yeah. Yeah. And the concept of, he talks about in there, the concept of progressive and basically the willingness to seek out fear, right? In reasonable ways, but seek out fear, right? And figure out those things that scare you most, to just pursue them, right?
Yeah.
To train your mind to on how to handle fear, right? That just being afraid of something in and of itself doesn't mean that's your mind trying to protect you from something, right?
Right.
It may be your mind trying to get away of something.
Right. And I think he's proved to himself by skydiving that he can actually overcome it if he needs to. And it's interesting because his business, the whole foundation of what he's doing is based on that, trying to figure that out for his life. And then the exhaust was like fitness centers and, all of this stuff just related to his pursuit of that. Just don't chase the hard thing. Don't be afraid. Just step into it.
How do I understand what are those things that are limiting me? And then how do I actually go to pursue them? I mean, he talked about, he mentioned it real quick, but if you follow him on Instagram, he became a professional bodybuilder. And, it was something he was afraid of. And I mean, that's a kind of a big commitment, right?
Kind of.
God knows.
Look legit. Look, he's legit.
Right.
This isn't just like, hey, I'm going to go do a triathlon.
I'm going to go, change my body to be, one of the, most competitive in the world. I think is a whole different
crazy.
level. But,
yeah.
It was great. It was really great. Great interview. We've got a bunch of them coming up in the next few weeks. So if you're listening and you haven't subscribe.
You can hear Greg make fun of me for being old. You had an opportunity there to say like, oh,
no.
But we know Peter's old. I'm just kidding.
So, so if you haven't subscribed, do it. Got a bunch of great episodes coming up, and we'll see you next time on the Founders Journey podcast.